Hello, welcome to Meet the Masters. Tim Watson here. Today I'm joined by Master Don Aguilio. Hello, sir. Good morning.
Oh, good afternoon
Good
to
afternoon.
you.
Yeah, it just passed for me. Thanks for joining me, sir. How's it going?
Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here. I I am nervous and excited for this opportunity, so just grateful to be here.
I think I mentioned this to you lately, and probably in the past like 3 or 4 months, you've done quite a few interviews in your other life as a an artist. And so I figured it was time to cross into the martial arts field and talk about your journey in the martial arts side of your life. So
Sure. When you asked me to do this, I think you had talked about the other interviews, and I'm like, this is such a different arena. So switching gears was the biggest challenge, but I've also seen the interviews, and I'm starstruck by who you have on here. So I'm just like, I don't know that I'm there yet to be able to talk about these things, having watched a lot of the interviews. So again, just grateful to be here. I appreciate it.
oh, absolutely. When you look at it though, some of those guys have been around for a long time. But when you look at yourself, it's how long has it been? 20, close to 25 years,
About that 27 years now
right?
training.
Yeah. So there's a generation where that they started a little earlier, and you look back and you may be younger than some of the people that I've done interviews with, but and may not have been a master for quite as long, but you've been around just as long as a lot of people.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's every single time there's a milestone, I do reflect. But now I judge or I base my milestones on my students' work and achievements. So rarely do I get a chance to look at my own history, and I haven't been home for a really long time. So these questions that you sent me, at least having this interview is sort of a homecoming for me because I get to actually, hone in on my own journey or the journey that I've had with those in my past, rather than always thinking about, the studio, which is, as you know, owning a studio, that's your focus, and the students are the focus. So
Absolutely. So let's go ahead and get started on that then. Can you talk to us about how you got started in the martial arts and how do we get to here? Let's I know that's a big leap, but how'd you get started in the
uh,
martial arts?
I was a 13-year old Filipino in a very non-Filipino community in central Pennsylvania. So I come from State College, PA. I'm an immigrant from the Philippines. So when I came to State College, of all places, I was one of maybe a handful of Filipinos in my school. But even then, I was just a shy, timid kid. So walking down the halls at school was a always a challenging experience. And learning how to talk to people, learning how to stand up tall, learning how to be who I am. I didn't know how to do those things. And I think my parents saw something in that. They knew they had to do something. So they told me to take a martial arts class with a friend of theirs' daughter, who was also taking it at Penn State Martial Arts Group. Um, so I took it, and I still remember the two white belts who I stood with. I actually got to see um, Kate Strauss in Colorado, who doesn't train anymore, but she was the white belt who was right next to me, and she would just kind of look over at me on my first day and be like, "Why?" Probably was like, "Why is this kid so scared?" But learning how to throw a punch or learning how to throw a kick, I mean, those were so wildly out of the realm of possibilities for me as a teenager with that kind of mentality. Um, but the martial arts threw me in the deep end of the pool, and I learned real quick I needed to get a sense of myself, to understand how to be with people, how to interact. Um, so yeah, that's how I got started. And I still, even just being up in front of people, teaching every single day now, little hints of that shy teenager still come up for me. You know, it's always a learning experience. Who's going to show up that day? Who's going to show up inside you that day? Who has to be there that day, learning to adapt? So lessons all the way from the first day of class still sort of resonate and still come up.
Do you remember who was do you remember the instructor, who the instructor was? Was it Master K?
It was not Master K. So Penn State Martial Arts Group was two factions. It was one on campus, which Master K led, and then um, Dr. Yonner, who was in charge of the community group at the
Okay.
athletic club. Wow, these all these names and all these places. It's great talking about them. So before Master Merrill took over that studio, it was Mr. Yonner.
Oh, okay. And
Yeah. And
so, yeah, go ahead.
oh, I was gonna say Master Strom, but back then she was I believe she was a green or a brown belt when I first joined. So Master Susan Strom, which most masters know now because she leads many committees. So
So was that the studio? Did it then become a Mountain Wind?
yes, so a couple years after that, about a year after I started, year or two, Master Merrill took over at the athletic club. And before long, he was given the studio, which he was allowed to turn into a Mountain Wind Martial Arts. It became his own studio. Uh, so yeah, he wasn't my first instructor, but he was my primary instructor for most of my training.
What was your first impressions of working with Master Merrill, other than
Uh,
looking straight up?
yeah, no, yeah, I don't look as far up anymore. But being Filipino, you know, I didn't grow too much more than I did at 13. You know, my first interactions with Master Merrill were not actually in uniform. I knew his uh I knew him from as a parent of one of the students at the middle school, and even then he was imposing. He had his long ponytail at that point. Um, that was a Yeah, that was a really long time ago. So he still had the long ponytail when I first knew him. But when he first took over class, I didn't know what to think. He was a big culture shock, and as I'll probably talk about later, you know, he is a presence, and I felt in contrast that I was not one. So I had a lot to learn from this man who came in and took over and had his own way of teaching, had his own way of being, and I was along for the ride.
That's awesome. I find quite a few contrasts, or our journeys were parallel, and I feel the same way. I started older, but I had a very loud instructor, loud, like, you know, he was a presence, and I was that,
Mhm.
like you said, that shy. I was 21, but never would I've ever imagined that I'd do this as a living at this point.
Right? Or
um,
even take on those characteristics
yeah.
or traits. Right.
Do you remember the first time that you got asked to help out with class, or assist, even if it was just working with someone on the side?
You know what? I don't I don't remember the first time. I do remember it being a part of our training at a younger rank and at a younger age. So, I guess being the shy kid, it's much more prominent in my memory, but Master Merrill was always a big um he was always a big advocate for making sure that we understood how to be in front of people and as early as possible. So he would have, I think he had me as young as maybe green or brown belt try to lead drill. And he would do it in rotation, so everyone got a chance to do it. And unlike many examples I see, he didn't always put maybe the strongest people or the loudest or most adept people in front of the class. He would make sure that everyone got that experience to understand the responsibility of it and to understand how to sort of do it your own way. So he would actually give advice and he would give pointers on how to lead in real time, so that you got to practice it in that moment instead of just be out feeling like you were alone in that space. But yeah, as young as green or brown belt, he would ask. But then as soon as I became a black belt, he actually handed me the kids class. So that was a big vote of confidence. I don't think he thought maybe he thought I had the biggest potential. I don't think I was the best person to do it, but I think he understood that I had a big sort of empathy and compassion for other kids who may have gone through the same space that I did, that I would know how to talk to them, or at least, be available to them.
Yeah,
Um,
I find a lot of
so
people that started younger can sometimes be more relatable to kids because,
mhm.
like you said, you went through that same process. How old were you when you took over that class?
Let's see, class. Maybe I was I was already helping out, but I was maybe black belt. 18. I
Okay.
took over the class.
Wow.
Maybe I was 17. I guess that's not as young as most members now. They're very young black belts now. But back then I felt like I was too young. But
Yeah, but
I think I was
not
always
to,
gonna feel that
it's
way.
still young to take over a class and be like, all right, this is your class. You can mold it however
Right.
you want.
Yeah, he partnered me with Master Strom, of course, so I got to work with her as a co-teacher. She took the lead a lot. I mean, she's an educator. She's a mighty educator. So to learn under his guidance, to learn with an educator how to teach kids, and then be a sort of a kid myself, I think it was a really unique situation where I got to learn really fast, how to teach in my own way and how to learn to teach from others.
Awesome. So you
So
went to Penn State as well, right? So
I did.
did
Yeah.
you train there as well?
I didn't. I stayed with the athletic club, even though I was physically closer to the Penn State martial arts group. I grew up there, so to switch over to the Penn State martial arts group on campus would have been a huge culture shock for me. I told Master Merrill I'm gonna stay here at a Mountain Wind. And then he actually told me, after still trying to take on kids club and the kids class and still trying to train, he told me freshman year, he's like, son, this is freshman year, go be a college student. He understood that I may need to take a step back, and I had a little protest, but he looked at me and he's like, you need to do this. And to this day, he makes sure that every once in a while when we do get to talk, and he still gives me it's a guilt trip for not staying in touch as much as I should or feel I need to. But he still reminds me that life comes first, and there are a lot of things that come before martial arts. So make sure I get done what I need to in my personal life. I think that was one of the earliest lessons I got from him too, that martial arts is meant to support our lives, um, not be our lives, right? So it becomes a part of your life. Freshman year, I think, was the most humbling year for me. So he told me to take a step back, and I think that made me want to come to class more. It made me recommit. I'm like, okay, I understand. I actually need this more now than I ever did before, because life is now like I had control of my life being out on my own. I needed this to support me even more.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, even still to this day, there's nothing better than taking that hour and just forgetting about life.
Yes,
The old leave your worries in your shoes for an hour.
I
So
like that. I might use that.
I I can appreciate that. I'm sure you did as a college student.
I did. I learned to compartmentalize. Sometimes it was more challenging than others. Especially now, it's more challenging to compartmentalize life. And I would, may I steal that? I like that. Leave, leave, leave. leave, what is it? Leave
Uh,
your
yeah, leave your worries in your shoes. You step on the
worries in
mat
your shoe.
or leave them in the lobby. I'm sure it's something Master Godwin said, many times.
I like that.
You have that sacred time of training or for anyone, it's working out or training or just doing something that you don't have to focus on life for whenever it is, 60 minutes.
Right. I think we're constantly battling sort of the administrative end of what we do as teachers now. So it's like when you tell them to leave their worries in their shoes, this is also the work that you do. So it's like it's hard to to reconcile that with your sort of our own challenges as instructors. But yeah.
Yeah. So I think you and I connected through COVID and the all of that, and I went back many times of going through things, whether it was comic books, and then I went back through pictures and found that you and I were on the same panel testing for Edon um, in
Oh yeah.
2006, which was crazy.
Wow. How many people were in that test?
Just that one panel, it's probably 20 to 25. And you were the row ahead of me, so Erin, my now wife, was taking pictures, and you were in all of the pictures that she took. There you were, like, in front of me, like two over.
Oh wow. Can I grab some of those pictures?
Yeah, I think I sent a few of them to you on Messenger, but I
Oh,
I
you
can
right there.
I can definitely make sure you get those. But yeah, it was one of those. I remember seeing you at Region 8 events, but our paths never really crossed other than that, you know, uh, working out and testing for that 2 hours, whether we realized it or not.
Same. Yep. Through the years, and especially when you came and when you commissioned me for the artwork, I was starstruck. I'm like, I know you from way back then. I can't believe we're connecting now. But I mean, COVID did some positive. It didn't do some positive things. Positive things came out of the
Right.
COVID era too. I
Absolutely.
appreciate that.
Yeah, of course.
But even still, Region 8 is sort of a dense area. I guess I wasn't old enough to have been able to move around as much also when I was there.
Right. Yeah, because you're out now. You were out. What's now is Region
Yeah,
22. Um,
me too.
do you still feel like that's your home away from home when it comes to martial arts? Do you still have family out there?
I do. I still have family. Yeah, my parents are still in state college, and my brother is in Jersey. So my home base it's hard to say. It's still East Coast. Um, but I do feel like the Bay Area. I mean, it's been home for a really long time. So when I'm on the East Coast, I am homesick for California now.
I
I
imagine.
hope Merrill doesn't hear
What's
that.
that?
I hope Master Merrill doesn't hear
Uh,
that.
he understands. He
But I know
understands.
he'll be fine.
So, how did your martial arts training change when you made the? I know you lived in Houston for a while, and then you made your way to California. How did your martial arts come with you in that
It
transition?
it's it certainly came with me. I did chase it though because as dense as Region 8/22 was, I was never there when it was 22. I left beforehand. So I guess I'll keep calling it Region 8 and then keep correcting myself. But when I moved out to Texas, Master Sharp was the closest person to me, and it would have been an amazing experience being able to get there on time. But I worked the 9 to 5 at an animation studio, and by the time I would be able to drive up to their studio, it would already be the end of class.
Mm.
So unfortunately, I was never able to, in the short time I was in Houston, never able to train regularly with Master Sharp. So I had done independent study and took a hiatus while I was in Texas for about 3 years, being able to drop in and say hi every now and then. But I would go home a little more often than I would see Master Sharp. Um, so yeah, I would go home. I would get I would get assignments from Master Merrill to take a look at this form or make sure you're up on your one steps, and try and see if I can ramp up the game. But I wasn't able to do that down in Texas. So about 3 years there, I lost a job at the animation studio, and I could either go east or go west. So I had sort of a choice, and I decided to continue going west to California. So that going to Texas though, I understood the expanse of our association. I understood how widespread we were, and within a region, I understood that Region 8 is a unique place. Region 22, Region 8 is a unique place. There were a lot of things that were combined. There are a lot of things that were close knit. Um, in other parts of the association, there are studios that feel very alone and feel like they're doing things on their own, and I can understand that kind of loneliness that can feel like. Especially also coming out to Region 1, our expanse between studios. I mean, it's getting better now, but the expanse between studios can feel really vast. So we do what we can to sort of stay in contact with other studios. So anytime we have a clinic, we jump on the opportunity because it's one time out of the year that people will fly in for clinics or drive for very long distances just to see each other in the region. So yeah,
Yeah, Region 8
a lot of
definitely
independent.
is spoiled when it comes to having things in close proximity. With some people will be like, "Oh, I got to travel 2 hours. I got to drive 2 hours to this event." It's like you have no idea how easy that is. Um,
Yeah.
what's the closest dojang to you in San Francisco?
Now we have, I'm not in the most remote of areas, but Joint Forces, Tung Sido, Master Jenna, and Ms. Flom are out there who are also from the East Coast.
Yeah.
It's nice to have neighbors who I know very well and have a lot of history with down there. So San Jose is about 45 to an hour away. And then in any direction, about an hour to an hour and a half away, I have one to th about 3 or 4 studios,
Oh,
more like 1 to 3 studios, of varying sizes and varying ranks. So I'm not the most remote of any of the studios in Region 1, but it can still feel pretty lonely out here.
yeah, especially when you're teaching however many days a week that you teach and you feel like sometimes you don't have that connection or you don't have someone to bounce ideas off of. um
Mhm.
you know I totally get
Yeah,
that.
that can be tough. And I know that there are many who also juggle their 9 to 5 with their teaching too, and that's sort of the boat I'm in now. I'm trying to figure out how to be the best of both worlds, and it's a constant. If I pay attention here, this one suffers, and vice versa. So I don't know. I don't really share with my students what I do. I say day job, but I really do it more at night. So I come home from the studio, and then I do my freelance until like 3 or 4 in the morning, and then I get up and do it again the next day. But I don't combine the worlds. But with the advent of like social media, Facebook and Instagram, I'm pretty sure some of the students have stumbled onto what I do for a living. So sometimes I won't be here like on the weekends for the open studio and demo team stuff because I have to say under my breath I'll be at a Comic Con. And they're like, wow, but I'm like, no, no, it's not as glorious as it sounds. It's actually a work. It's actually work, and I don't get to see much of Comic Con these days. So,
um why do you feel like you kind of you still compartmentalize the two?
um, and this is some of the things I got from being with or being trained by educators and being trained by military. The idea of professionalism comes into play a lot with trying to juggle the two worlds. With the comic book world, as there's a lot of subject matter that may not be necessarily appropriate for all the kids or all the ages that I teach. Just because I do artwork doesn't mean that the artwork may be, some of it might be gory. Some of it might have subject matter that might not, might be a little more adult. So I just try not to have to talk about it too much. If, some of the kids who are growing up now get to see some of the more some of the things that may be more violent or may have things that aren't suited for maybe my kids' class. At which point I won't build that wall. I'll just, I can talk about it. But then usually the case, I have kids who want to do art. And once they hit 16 or 17, they start to tell the parents, I want to do art for a living or study art in college. At which point the parents will come to me and start asking questions like, how did you do it? How did you get started? Those walls start to come down. But other than that, I don't broadcast, what I do as as an artist in the martial arts space.
Understand that. I found out that you were an artist from Master Jorgensen sharing your posts on Facebook, and
He's awesome.
yeah, well, it's one of those I shared.
Again, he's one of my heroes. Again, he's one of my heroes from childhood who and when he started to get in touch with me, especially during the pandemic about what I do, I'm like, whoa, this is this is far out. I can't believe that we're speaking on the same levels. I watched him as a white and orange belt perform on the floor. And
Yeah,
I was like, wow, I want to do that one day. And now we're talking action figures and comics. He had me signing some Spawn at the last Masters Clinic, and I was like, this is so weird and this is so cool at the same time.
I saw that. I was so jealous. I was like, oh, I need to do that too.
It's too funny.
It's so cool. Yeah, I think that was it. Like he shared one of your social media posts of you doing a Spawn cover, and being someone who grew up, I loved Image comics growing up, and the fact that it was just like my jaw dropped, and it's like, how am I not friends with this guy?
I'm starting to realize there's more than just a handful of us. I just don't know everyone yet, so you're gonna have to connect me, especially at Masters
I will
Clinic, I
definitely
think.
connect you this year, especially after you did the commission for us for my friend Anna Setianto.
Hmm.
Her husband Jeff is a huge comic book fan, and Master Dana
Oh,
Scott, who teaches at Kaizen Karate with Master Priest, Pat Priest,
mhm.
is a major comic book fan as well. So I will be
I
sure
I
to
know the
connect.
name.
What's
I
that?
know the names. I know the names, and at Masters Clinic, I've seen you all from afar. And I remember the names and the faces from being part of Region 8 from way back then too. So uh can't wait to actually see. I think I shook hands with Master Scott during their training, so or during their test
Yeah,
last time. So
awesome. We'll have to make that connection. We might have to get those signed while we're out there.
oh, that's too funny. Too funny.
Yeah. So speaking of Master's Clinic, and correct me if I'm wrong, for those that don't know the process, to go from third degree to fourth degree in the World Tong Soo Association, we go through a candidate process. Um, Talk to us about your process going through it personally, for you.
When I think there especially talking about the names of the teachers that came before us and reflecting back on our time and becoming a teacher before being considered for masters. um, I think I was foreign to the idea of moving up or stepping into that space just because I was so in my head about always teaching and it's always about the students what they need. So when it was time to when Master Wolverton approached me and under the guidance of Master Merrill and Master Susan Strom too, who would always ask me, "How do you feel about it? How do you feel about it?" I always didn't have an answer. I was like, I'm humbled to be asked. I don't feel it's that I'm ready, that it's time yet. Um, if you're gonna ask the question, I'm gonna answer it as honestly as I can. I don't think I'm ready. I don't think it's time. I don't need to do that yet. And I think that I'll always, there's always something to learn. And at a certain point, Master Merrill came back with me with, "You'll never feel ready." And I think it's time to create that space for other people, to leave that space for other people to take, and for you to take the space that you should. And we harken back to a time when you're never gonna be ready for red belt, you're never gonna be ready for black belt, but I don't think sometimes that's not for you to say.
Right.
That's for you to accept. And I think when it was time to be considered for master's clinic for year one, it I think it was one of those moments where I had to yield and be like, I have to trust the process. So I said yes sir, yes ma'am, and I dove in. Being a part of the pandemic crew was for a lot of people who have been through that process in person, it was more of a culture shock. For me, because I was year one as pandemic, I accepted it as okay, this is the way it's going to be. And having taught classes on Zoom, I was already sort of used to the process. Um, and we got a lot of instruction online. We got to see a lot of the people that we were testing with. The interaction was a little more closed off just because it was more instruction on lecture style and training through on screen. But we got a lot of screen time. We got to learn a lot through the Zoom process. So yeah, the master's clinic process was, or the testing for master's was a very unique process, but I felt like I got a lot from it, and I'm still learning from it.
When you did you do one of your tests at the clinic, or were they both outside of the master's clinic?
They were both outside of the master's clinic. They
So
still gave us experiences at my first time there, um, that were a part of the in-person experience as much
right.
as they possibly could.
I remember that. Because I have I'm trying to think of some of like Master Rodriguez, Helena Rodriguez, Joel Santos from Puerto Rico. Um,
Oh, this was your class?
no, that
Oh
was
wow.
that were they in the same group as you or no?
Oh yes, they were.
Yeah.
Yes, they were.
So I just remember
Uh,
how excited they were, especially Master Santos, um, to be in person because it's just you can't describe the feeling where you look around. It's just like you're home.
you're home and you're a white belt again
Yeah,
at the same time.
yeah, yeah.
Talk about shy teenager. That's exactly how I felt for the first in-person master's clinic. I was like, when I was coming into the to eat, I was like, oh, where do I sit? Who do I sit with? I was in a room full of people I heroes and instructors and people who have taught me in direct and indirect ways for many many years. So I was small fish in a very large ocean at that point. Ocean's getting smaller. I get it,
But what the great thing
but
is you can literally sit down with anyone and you know talk to them, and they're that's what I found through this process is just how humble and accepting everyone is when it comes to the master's clinic and the process that you go through because they've all been there.
right. And that experience coupled with the interviews that you've done, getting into teachers' heads, masters' heads, about their process, the humanity of it, the fact that people are human with flaws and unique experiences and more shared experiences, builds that connection with that before you even get to shake their hands. So I appreciate that.
I appreciate that. I'm humbled to be a part of that process. It's still weird to think that I've did as many as I've done. Um,
Mhm.
One of the things I wanted to talk about was, can you share some memories of Grandmaster Shin? Um, growing up, being a part of Region 8, obviously he was there. Um, what were your first impressions and thoughts about being able to see him, whether it was from afar or up close?
My first meeting with Grandmaster Shin was during a meal of bulgogi in the hospitality suite at Region 8 Championship. Poconos, I believe. And then that's the thing about Region 8. We were taught, everyone in Region 8 was taught contribution and service to whatever was going on, whether it was a championship, whether it was a GUP test, whether it was a DON test. Everyone was taught that at a very young rank. And I think my first meeting of him with him, I was either helping out with door or I was helping out with the hospitality suite, but Master Merrill sat me down uh in front of Grandmaster Shin. I think he was sitting with him and he was like, come here, Don, have a seat. And I was like, yes, sir. And I sat down next to Grandmaster Shin and he introduced me and I shook hands and bowed. And you know what it's like for the first time. Um, I didn't know what to say. I was still that scared teenager, but now I was I was a black belt. I was a teenager. Um, I think coming into adulthood, but I didn't know what to say. And I think the first thing that Grandmaster Shin said to me was a word of gratitude. I think he said thank you. I think the sense I got from this man was that he understood that people learned service and contribution, and he knew that everyone around him was committed to this association. So Master Merrill and Master Strom were very quick to introduce me to or to sort of usher that bridge, to build that bridge with me and Kwanjinim Shin and the leaders of the association. Um, but that word of gratitude really stuck with me. Uh, at that point forward, being a black belt, I was also given the role of the video team for Worlds, and I worked with Master Strom and Dr. Patrick Parsons at that point, along with Master Merrill, who was given security. So I was given a red shirt really early, and we were running around Worlds every year, sort of getting or capturing video and doing interviews for the championship video every 2 years. And every chance I got to see Grandmaster Shin from that point forward, it was always gratitude. It was thanks for doing what you do. And now that he saw me in a red shirt, he understood. Oh, you're part of the video team. And Master Strom would always make sure that we got some FaceTime, even as busy as everyone was. Uh, so yeah, so all of my interactions with Grandmaster Shin, as brief as they were about um, acknowledging service and being able for me to be able to say thank you to him also. He had a lot of people to talk to, and I got the sense he wanted to talk to every single person and make sure that everyone was seen. Um, and that is a tough job, but he did it, and that's the sense I got from him.
Yeah, from everyone I talked to, he had a knack, and Grandmaster Bowden is the same, and Grandmaster Strong does it as well. But he made you feel important, right? And he
Hmm.
always made a habit of remembering your name or
He did.
recalling something that it's like, man, he remembers that.
I don't know how he did that.
I know, and it was, and everyone has a story like that, which is just remarkable and explains why people are still loyal to his vision and what he built to this day.
Yeah, I do miss him.
Yeah, a lot of people do. Um, and it's crazy as the years go by. Um, a couple years ago, I asked at Masters Clinic for people to raise their hands if they hadn't met him, and there was only a handful. There was maybe three or four, but the
Oh,
fact that people were at Master's Clinic and had not had the chance to meet him
oh wow.
is crazy. And it, as we get farther and farther away from him being alive, it's just wild that that's the case. But you know, the work we do to continue his legacy is all that more important.
Right, right. Wow, that's another thing that's tough to reflect on too.
You One of the things I wanted to bring up, and I mentioned I've listened to a handful of your uh, interviews in the comic book world, was the thing you said, and I don't, you may have touched base on it, but I haven't heard it. Was at some point you wanted to reconnect with your Filipino heritage, and I want to talk about that a little bit because we like to talk about the whole person. Um,
Okay.
or at least I do. I like to get everyone's story, and you know, talk about that, like what that meant to you, and what you do now to continue to connect to that heritage.
Uh, when I was at Penn State, one of the other things besides martial arts that pulled me away from, social time or free time was being a part of the Filipino Association, because growing up in state college, I didn't have, I wasn't exposed too much to Filipino culture and heritage. So when there was a Filipino Association there, I spent time with them. They were coming from places like New York and Philadelphia, like places that were dense. So I got my first sort of taste on how to be Filipino from sort of it's besides what I got from home from being around that crew, and they were all my age. So it was like I got a perspective on what that's like. Um, since then, my connection to my cultural heritage, besides moving out to San Francisco Bay Area, which is heavily dense, I hear my native tongue a lot on top of the other languages that come out of the Philippines, which I didn't know existed for a really before a decade or two ago. Um, besides that, I'm constantly trying to stay as young as I can. So to do that, besides the martial arts, I learned to dance, and dance and music culture coming from the Philippines is a huge heritage, and one that you can crack open and never find the bottom of, and that's what we're doing every year. So dancing on top of martial arts keeps me in tune with my challenges with joints, my challenges with movement, with all sorts of things. And so staying connected to that and learning about my own cultural heritage also sort of I try to bridge that with martial arts also as a cultural artifact. So I try and instill in my students the curiosity to know where things come from, all the way to how do you say front kick in Korean? We say that all the time, but I'm like, if I try to teach my kids, if you just try and memorize what that is in Korean, that's one thing. But to understand that that comes from Korean heritage, to understand that what we do is a part of a heritage, grounds the art in something beyond just us, especially in a vast region, to not see our neighbors all the time, to not understand how big this is. It's not just the association. It's it's Korean heritage. Um, so that's where I sort of break down the walls, where it's not as compartmentalized. I try and bring in some of that language of learning your heritage and learning your history into teaching in the dojang. And that's also why I'm really interested in things like studying teachers who are the culture bearers in the Philippines. Right now, being a part of my group, Parangal, we know who our teachers are. We know who we go to the Philippines to learn from and understand that they are a part of a bigger community, and a part of a community that's still struggling to thrive in a modern world. And that is a conversation that's more than relevant to us as martial artists. How does front kick with the toes pulled back using the ball of your foot? How is that relevant in a shoe wearing modern society, right? So all sorts of things like that, like being able to reconcile ancient or I guess, ancient ideas and concepts and reconcile that with a modern sensibility or a modern situation is a constant sort of challenge and struggle. Cultural preservation is another one. If we've been doing something for a really long time, what is a respectful way to ask? Why can't that change or why can't that evolve? Why can't it become something different? And if it's just been done that way for a really long time, is that good enough a reason? Right? So in terms of cultural artifact, we talk about preserving this dance or this music or this way of life. But if we only preserve it and allow it to evolve, or we're not open to it evolving, how is it a culture? It's not a living tradition anymore. It's just a thing of the past. And that's not respectful to a culture. A culture is meant to evolve and adapt. And I can talk hours and hours about it just because now, we sort of pulled two of my worlds together and they sort of start a dialogue. But that's that kind of dialogue I try and bring into the martial arts space as much as possible. Difference being, I mean, the martial arts, it has this not a singular purpose, but it has a purpose. It has a mechanism. There are mechanisms here that we have to preserve because that's a common language, especially in a global association. If we go to South America and I don't speak Spanish, I can throw a spinning hook kick and we know what we're talking about. Um, so some of those things there are standard practices, but there is room for evolution, and I think that's why we call it an art form.
I love that. I love the way you broke that down in the world of, realistic self-defense and why are you doing forms nowadays.
Right.
Having that connection and the way you explained it is perfect. And like you said, there is room for evolution. There is room for new and flashy. You can do the jump kicks, you can do, weapons, you can do all of those things, and you can also do this too. That you
And
can
you can
do
do
a
this.
the Pyongan forms that have been done for whatever, over 100 years at this point, and you can still preserve that part of the martial arts as well. Um, so I
And
like.
we evolve as people. So it's like an internal evolution too. I mean, we could do flashy kicks for for me, for a very short window of our lives. And after that, our circles get smaller. And they have to because we have to, preserve our joints. We have to preserve our energy. We have to preserve our energy for teaching 2 or 3 classes in a row. Those kinds of like small things as instructors, I'm learning too. Learning to step out of the way and be like, here's instructors who can do what I'm asking for better than I can, and to know I can delegate that and be like, show them what I mean,
Right.
because I can't do that anymore. But I'd like everyone to try it. I even want to try it, so I learn from my students all the time. As I'm sure you do, and a lot of the people who listen, they understand that process. Learn from your students because they're stepping into a space you may have occupied before, and the humility that comes out of that is where I learn from now. But yeah, that's all part of the evolution and adaptation. That's all part of a sort of a cultural study of what we do.
Yeah, I in having I had my ACL repaired over a year ago, and everything that you just said is the humility of the you trying to do something, and luckily I have students and instructors where it's like, come here, do this, but then sometimes it's like, oh, it's not quite right, and it's like, oh, I wish I could just do it. I'm getting to the point where I can do it again, but
Right.
there's that opportunity to, like you said, push someone else to do better and
Mhm.
demonstrate and up their game as well. Um, and it
Right.
challenged, at least it challenged me to be a better instructor when I couldn't when I couldn't teach stuff physically. Is
Mhm.
how do I articulate this better with my words because I can't kick the way I want to kick.
Right. I went through a phase, especially when I was coming into terms with what I can and cannot do as an instructor physically, of having to figure out, do I need to apologize to my students for
Yeah.
not being able to do that? You know, there's that sense of sort of guilt. I'm asking them to do something. I'm asking them to try something. But when I execute, I'm not 100% where I want to be. Um, and that, I'm learning to shed that fast because that doesn't serve myself or that doesn't serve the students at all, that sense of guilt about it. Um, so yeah, learning to articulate things better, that's a huge craft that everyone undertakes, especially teachers who are paying attention, of course. Um, yeah, that's a huge one. How long was the ACL reconstruction? How long is the recovery for that? You
It's a
were
work in
teaching the
progress.
way through
Still work. It happened in so November of 22, I got the surgery done and
22.
basically couldn't kick pivot turn on that knee until like 6 months after. So then I basically started from scratch on the right side at that point. Um, but like kind of like what you were talking about, in at least in my head, it was like, oh, in 6 months I'll just be back. I can do the things that, and I had those moments where it's just like I would do stuff and it looked horrible, at least in my opinion.
Mhm.
But my instructors understood, my students understood where I was. But that's hard. It's very humbling, like you said, to want to show something and you're like, oh, it's not where I want it to be, but we're getting there.
Yeah, we're getting there.
Yeah. Will we ever get there? I don't know, but
I
it's
mean,
every course.
as long as we're always in tune with that humility, I think we'll be blessed with students who are more forgiving about
Yeah.
that. I see ego on the floor a lot. I mean, that's just the way it is. And you know, that comes and the way people interact with ego is not as comfortable or beautiful as having people on the floor who are in tune with the people they're trying to teach and are when you watch that dynamic, it's like, oh, okay, I think the students are more willing to step into that space instead of being more closed off, um, because it's coming from an instructor with a sense of humility.
Mhm.
um, so yeah, that's a lifelong lesson, and that's a daily one, right? that's gonna that's gonna keep us on our toes.
So at this point in martial arts, what keeps you teaching and training? Is it that constant, like, you can improve, whether it's improving how to do a technique, improving how to teach? Why after
Oh,
25, 26 years are you still here?
it's the paperwork, sir. I love paperwork now. I think I don't know. I can't tell, but I think headquarters must be annoyed with me because I email I email way too much. I'm asking for a lot of things from headquarters, paperwork, this and new student that, and um, no, I know it's a part of the job, and I
That's right.
appreciate the structure that comes from it. I appreciate what they do every single day, but really, it's the white belt who at the end of their first class tells their parents, I want to stay. I want to, class is over. I have to tell them we're done. We're done. We're finished. We're finished, kiddo. And they're like, Mom, I want to stay. And I'm like, there's no class left today. I have to go home and work. But, just their eyes light up and I see everything that's ahead of them in those eyes, right? When I work with a white belt who on their first class, they run up to mom and dad and they light up. I'm like, look at all the potential that person has and look at that journey that they get to have now. Um, yeah. So yeah, along the way, you hit red belt, you hit brown belt, you hit those really heavy ranks where you have, every other class you're thinking, maybe this isn't for me, maybe this is for me, maybe I have to take a step back, maybe I take a break, maybe this is too much. The potential of white belt is like it's unmatched. It's unique. It's a high. It's that's what keeps me going. To get to connect with the person who's never done this before and introduce them to a world with limitless potential in their own way. It's not in my way. I will teach them my way on their first day, but they will receive it in a way that's uniquely theirs. And hopefully, that ownership of that art or craft takes them into the second class and then the third class. And then before you know it, they're hitting brown belt and thinking about taking a break because they committed everything. They threw everything they had into practicing. And it means something to them. It's not just cursory, it's not just surface. It is actually a part of their character. Um, that's what keeps me going.
I love that.
Was that too abstract?
No, not at all. Not at all. Um, I was talking to my mom today, and she was telling me that my niece is a Edon. She's 16, and she's like, oh, every once in a while she'll be the first person in line in class, and she's like, I'm surprised by that. I'm like, how are you surprised by that? Like, she just kept showing up. Like, that's what happens. Like, if you keep showing up, um, some people quit, some people keep training. What I do think is important, some people be like, oh, I feel really bad that so and so quit, and it's like, well, you got to look at let's say a kid got to brown belt or red belt, like you said, they spent 2 or 3 years of focusing on something. A lot of adults can't say that they've done that. Right? Like, yeah, the goal is black belt, but it's okay if you take detours or you never get there, because a lot of those lessons will stay with you for the rest of your life.
Whether
Um,
they know it or not.
yeah, and you get to be a part of their story regardless. So no, I understand exactly what you were saying there. Um, as we start to wrap up, is there anything else that you want to touch base on before we finish? Anything you want to share or talk about?
I think this could be my opportunity to sort of echo what Grandmaster Shin said to me every time I saw him was just communicating my gratitude. Um, being out here in Region One, and we talk about it within Region One all the time. We don't get to see our neighbors all that often. But staying connected in ways like this, seeing everyone at Master's Clinic, um, just having a welcoming home everywhere you go in this association has been a way of survival through the pandemic, a way of life for lifelong practitioners like you and myself, and a show of gratitude to everyone who has ever taught me, um, whether they are my newest white belt or all the way up to my oldest teachers. That was another thing Master Merrill and Master Strom always instilled in me was know who your teachers were, know who taught you that form, know who you taught this movement from. Remember the people who took you there, and my gratitude to all of them, and to all the future people who will continue to teach me. I think that's I think that's good. I think that'll work.
I think that's pretty good. I want to thank you for joining me. And you mentioned Masters Clinic. I missed last year with the injury, so I can't wait to get there. It's crazy to think that it's next month, but here we
It
are next.
is no, it is next.
So
Speaking of paperwork, I got to do.
that's right. Well, again, thank you for joining me, sir. I appreciate you taking the time out to chat, and
I appreciate it.
I look forward to seeing you next month.
You too.
All
You
right,
too.
thanks, Sue.
Give you a big hug. And
Absolutely.
again, I appreciate for the opportunity both to connect and to contribute in my own way into our world. Say hello to the other masters for me.
Will do. Thank you, sir. Thanks, Sue.
Thank you.